very much for having me. My name's James Gough, and I'm coming to speak to you about something I call scaling humanitarianism and lessons from the field. Someone just asked me if I was a gamer. I'm absolutely not a gamer, and I realise I'm in the presence of probably people who know more about what I've been doing than I do. So that's a good start. So I'm going to talk to you about two things, really. One, a particular experience I've had of using technology, digital technology, to try and solve a clear and present problem in the developing world, but also in the developed world. And then also to talk about how I think the lessons I've learned from perhaps failing in many parts of this can be used to scale humanitarianism in a way that makes sense for all of us in our day-to-day lives. So I think we'll just get the video out of the way. I started a company called One Shot Immersive. I'm a military doctor by background. I found myself in Afghanistan. I actually found myself injured in Afghanistan and being treated by a non-medic. And I received a blast injury and suddenly was confronted as a doctor with the reality of being a patient. And it was my first interaction with that vulnerability you feel, but also with the reality that most people don't actually know what to do. Which is kind of crazy if you think about it. We're walking along, we're probably better at fixing our iPhone than we are at fixing ourselves. So it was really like, how do you scale decent medical training, particularly in the realm of trauma, which, as you'll find out, affects all of us greatly. And so this starts, before we press play, just a trigger warning to give anyone online or anyone here. What you're about to see is what alludes to be some kind of incident on the tube, the London Underground, and this lady sustained a pretty bad leg wound. So there's a bit of blood, a bit of screaming and shouting. So without further ado, we'll press play. But if you do feel like you don't want to see this, then please, I won't take offence if you suddenly walk out. So that's totally fine. Could you just, is it just me or? Yeah. Cool. So we've got a bit of problems with the audio. It's about 4 minutes long, so I'll stay quiet and hopefully enjoy it as much as you can.
You are about to immerse yourself in a virtual reality experience. You will have a 360-degree viewpoint, so move your head in any direction to immerse yourself fully. Remember, what you are about to see is a simulation. Should you need to, simply remove the headset to exit the experience. You have been caught up in what seems like an explosion. Emergency services have been called, and there is no further immediate risk to you. You are free to help, but time is the crucial factor.
We need to leave. We can't just leave. We need to get out of here. We can't get out. It's safe to stay. We have to do something. We need to get out of here. What can we do? Come on! What do we do?
You must first attempt to stop the bleeding by placing direct pressure on the leg wound using a scarf or alternative material as a dressing.
Oh, give me a scarf. Give me a scarf. Just give me a scarf. Give me a scarf. Sorry. You're bleeding. You don't know what you're doing. You're saying what you're doing. This skill ring is not working.
You must continue to maintain the direct pressure on the bleeding wound whilst you fashion a makeshift tourniquet using a tie and something like a pen.
We've got something in your bag. We need something stick-like. Something stick-like. Something hard. I don't know what you need. Have a look. You must have something. Here. Put your hands in it. Oh. bleeding, it's not working! What's wrong? Stop bleeding! She's got cuts and bruises on her face. What should we do now?
You must now look in her mouth to make sure she has a clear airway to allow her to breathe.
Have a look in her mouth. Let's have a look in her mouth, see if it's blocked. But open it.
Seems clear.
Talk.
My name is Alice. You've been in an accident, but you can be okay. Okay. Look at me. Yeah. Okay, breathe with me.
You should keep checking the bleeding site and the airway to make sure they remain in a good state. Always reassure the casualty. Keep talking to them and wrap them as much as you can to keep them warm.
Cover up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Warm. Okay.
Well done. Although there is still a major disaster unfolding around you, you have delivered potentially life-saving treatment. Using these basic principles, you can continue to help others until emergency services arrive. And remember to ensure your own safety before treating any casualties.
Okay, so that was a collaboration with some people cleverer than me to try and work out how we get that very simple message across that catastrophic bleeding kills you first. So I'm glad there's a tube strike today because none of you have to go on the tube after watching that. But hopefully the message has got across in that simple 2D version of what is a 360 experience. So you'd have to imagine that you were wearing an Oculus or something like that and interacting. It keeps skipping along, I don't know why. So trauma accounts for 10% of global deaths. That's kind of nuts because you very rarely hear about trauma, but that's more than malaria, HIV, and TB combined. And yet it really isn't a subject that we dwell on much, apart from unless you're in the military or in aid groups, where it really is the single biggest threat that you face. Here in the UK, in the developed world, it's more or less 20% of trauma deaths are actually survivable. So actually you should be surviving, but you're not because something from the point of injury all the way to hospital happened or didn't happen that meant you died. One of the stories I remember from this is a photojournalist called Tim Hetherington, who died from a very survivable wound in Libya, in Misrata, and a friend of mine, David Knott, very well-known war surgeon, received him dead into the aid station, and it was just a puncture wound in his groin, and all it required was someone to just put their fist into the groin, onto the blood vessel, and stop the bleeding, but it just wasn't done. It's not rocket science. It's really, really simple stuff. In Afghanistan, the figure is close to 70%. So if you have experienced trauma in Afghanistan, you're likely to die, despite it being a survivable injury, and that's pretty devastating. And yet the solution is pretty simple when you think about what you can teach people to do on scene. And in the military, all soldiers get taught how to stop bleeding, and actually the survival rates in Afghanistan and Iraq were so high not because suddenly doctors got better, but it was because soldiers were able to do that, exactly what's needed in the first few moments. I'll give you a bit of data early on, is in the UK there are about 350 surgeons for every 1 million people. So we started to look at what was out there, what are the key reasons people are beginning to die. People die more from survivable wounds in other places. In Yemen, there are four surgeons for every 1 million people. So it does mean that if you arrive at a hospital, if you're lucky enough to actually get to the hospital, there's likely to be no surgeon there to even help you. And so despite me starting this business and thinking, how am I going to pay myself, I got slightly distracted from actually what was staring me in the face, which was this problem that probably didn't have a market in terms of a monetary market. And perhaps we all talked each other into dealing with this problem that we were seeing. And we turned down VC money because we knew they'd send us off to do office first aid in VR instead of addressing this. So I spent my wife's money and some other people's money on trying to get this this off the ground and working with the David Knott Foundation, we decided to see if using technology we could use VR as a bit of a force multiplier. So we can't obviously improve the number of surgeons in Yemen. That's not our bag. That's not something we can affect. But we could perhaps train more people to be able to do the most they could in the situation. And that's when we kind of bore Project Yemen. So what we describe as a world first, delivering virtual reality into a war zone to train people. So we developed and we focused on mass casualty triage. A mass casualty is simply defined as where the demand overwhelms the resources. So in this room, if there was some kind of, perhaps if 3 of you got injured, we have no resources at all. So in effect, in our little mini world here, it's like a mass casualty, no resources, no one to help you. But in a war zone, a mass casualty is really a devastating amount of injuries, and obviously completely overwhelms the healthcare facilities. But what you can do is you can sort people. Sort sounds pretty sobering, but you can sort out who's going to live and who's going to die, and you have to make that choice. It's obviously a choice you don't want to make, and in effect, you're almost playing God, really. And so you've got to decide what's the most I can do for the most. So triage being the French word to sort, and you really have to decide, well, if I treat these 5 people with the resources I have, they're all likely to survive. If I treat this one person who could survive but is so injured it's going to suck in all my resources, then I'm going to have to leave this person and I'm going to have to treat these 5, and unfortunately this person's probably not going to make it. So it's horrible. It's a horrible situation to be in, and I think even in the coronavirus pandemic we heard of facilities having to make those choices, especially when oxygen was short. So triage is an everyday thing in hospital. Normally it's fairly benign, but in a mass casualty it's something that really is deciding who lives and who dies. And how do you train for this? It's almost impossible to really recreate it. We did a little bit in the military of running around the field, putting labels on each other and trying to sort those that were likely to survive and those that weren't. And so we thought virtual reality is actually perfect for this, because virtual reality is great for teaching people to make decisions under pressure. So you saw the tube train scenario. It's great for just putting someone in that without fear, because of course you can fail and you can screw up and no one sees because you're in the virtual world. So we undertook this, and we wanted to create realism. We wanted to put people in a place, when they put the headset on, they really feel like they're in a mass casualty situation. I looked at thousands and thousands of images from the David Knott Foundation, and we created a scenario, a mass casualty, based on his own experiences, based on the patients he'd seen, the stories he'd seen from different war zones all over the world. This is a hospital in Wales, which is where I live, and we overnight destroyed it, made it look a little worse, and filmed in 360 a mass casualty with some amazing makeup artists and lots of people doing incredible stuff with sound and images. Once we had filmed that, we then gamified it. So went into a Unity engine and was then made interactive, so that in effect the product, you put the headset on, you're told you're in a mass casualty situation, that you're the triage officer and you're going to have to sort people into the categories of 1, 2, 3, 4. So the International Red Cross describes a triage protocol where you can put people into category 1, which is treat them now, otherwise they will die. Category 2, they can probably wait about an hour, so you can leave them and just make sure they're okay. Category 3 is walking wounded, so pretty much ignore them, put them in a room and just make sure they don't disrupt anything else. And that can be up to, broken leg can be walking wounded. It's just someone who's not critical. And then category 4, which is very difficult, which is expectant, and that's they're likely to die given the situation we're in. We're not going to be able to use our resources on those people. And so for each of those 10 patients, the user, the person with the headset on, is asked to make these choices. And then at the end, you get to see your answers. So that was the product. We delivered it in Yemen. But here's the crux of it all. 99.99% of investors would not invest in my company. Now, this isn't me slating investors. I 100% understand the pressures on them. This is just me saying that the model is broken. we're focusing on the wrong things, and there isn't an integral model within business and within the startup community particularly, and in digital tech, that allows us to address the greatest challenges of our time versus the problems, the pain points of the rich that actually pay the bills. So I don't want this to come across as a chip on my shoulder either. It's just simply there is this almost nuance between what people want and what the world needs, and it's trying to marry those up. And of course, there is no money to be made from saving a poor life. What a horrible sentence to write on a slide, but I don't think anyone could possibly disagree. This is a map showing you the percentage of the world that has had at least one COVID vaccination. And so I'm sure you can guess the orange, brown, pale colors are countries that have got less than 20% of people have had one vaccination. So money talks, there is no money in saving poor lives. And so now we're all okay, and everyone in this room has had their vaccine, or at least had the choice to have a vaccine. Of course, we can move on and forget about it, and the market continues. So it wasn't just me and my own small experience with One Shot Immersive, but actually the pandemic really highlighted this disconnect between what's needed and what people want. So just a few photos from Somaliland and Yemen. Syria is top right, and Somalia is bottom left. That's me on a Zoom call sitting in Wales with a group of surgeons in Somalia with headsets on, learning how to do mass casualty triage. So a wonderful experience, but also slightly disheartening that it's not a business. There is no business in it. Perhaps I was naive to think there ever was, but it's been a really good lesson for me. We've got the world's biggest health institution, so the WHO has paid us to do some stuff and deliver in these places, but not enough to keep the lights on. We've won 3 significant digital awards along the way. Our team is made of world experts in medicine, geopolitics, digital tech. So NASCO there is actually my boss at a data and cloud engineering consultancy, which I'm part of and work with as well. So there's an amazing team of people behind it who are all geared towards trying to solve this problem. But all of us are very clear that it's not going to wash its face. And so I talk about the great disconnect. I don't know if you've seen the film Don't Look Up, but if you haven't, there is a huge meteor about to strike Earth, and everyone is still looking at Twitter feeds and their immediate day-to-day activities. And I think things like climate change, or the unrest, obviously the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, these are things that are real. They're very present now, and it's trying to shift business towards some more kind of integral model that we can all address what the world needs, not just what the world wants. So what can we do? So this isn't just me whinging and complaining. I'm going to try and propose a few ways that we're trying, and I'm working with the consultancy I work with, but also with the McCain Institute in the US, a geopolitical think tank, to try and work out a model where we can leverage each other's expertise. So you here in the room, leverage the expertise of people who understand the needs more, leverage the expertise of investors, and try and get some buy-in that means that we're all happy. Because the truth is that the economy, the greatest threats to our economy are actually the greatest threats to our planet, if you like. So if you're at a loss as to where your particular business or organization needs to begin to say, well, gosh, the world is full of challenges at the moment, where the hell do I begin? Then the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report is a great place to start, because you can convince your management that these are actually risks to the economy, so their very existence as a business. But also it gives you a lovely list of things that, or not such a lovely list of things, that are the greatest risks to our existence, our economy, the things that we've got coming down the world. So actually it's nice because it's a guide. You can look at the Sustainable Development Goals, but for me, the World Economic Forums it speaks a language that perhaps that business is more in sync with. So it's not corporate social responsibility. As far as I'm concerned, that is dead. ESG, again, it can be a tick box exercise, but this is about integrating it into your your entire business practice. And so that's a good place to start. And then this is what I call the Southern Land model. It's nothing new in essence, but it's just a way of me describing how you can begin your kind of journey of integrating the world's needs into your business without compromising perhaps the bottom line. So begin to explore how you can use what you've got in front of you to actually do something. So one of the things that I have seen is that we don't spend enough time listening to the people who understand the needs themselves. So actually, it's for the most part, and certainly me as an employee and also my colleagues, all of us want to actually do some good. Generally, we're all pretty decent people. And most people want to do some good. It's just that the market doesn't necessarily lend itself to that, obviously. So harness that desire from your employees, but then educate yourselves on whatever the need might be. So start to collaborate, start to bring in people who know what they're talking about. I'll give you an example. At Infinite Lambda, the data and cloud engineering consultancy that I work for, we just started talking to the Halo Trust. They're a demining organization. Their aim is to rid the world of armed conflict. And they do that by demining the world, but they also do it by reducing the amount of small arms and light weapons that are just flying around between non-state actors. So we just started chatting to them, say, what are your problems? What are your challenges? They had a huge amount of data, but they didn't know what to do with it, or they didn't have the resources. So obviously us being a data and cloud engineering company, we were interested in that, but we didn't want to sort of head off in a direction if it didn't address one of their needs. It turned out that one of their great needs was trying to find evidence of small weapons diversion, small arms and light weapons diversion. They employed 9 journalists full-time to try and search manually on the internet to find evidence that Kalashnikovs had gone from state hands into non-state hands. And it was obviously an impossible task for 9 people. Even just understanding that need, suddenly you're like, oh, right, well, maybe we could actually help with that. And some of our software developers even saw it as fairly trivial to try and help them at least force multiply a little those 9 journalists and help them along. And so that's the first thing, is start to understand the need. Perhaps look at the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report, focus in on an area that perhaps you and your colleagues feel passionate about. Start collaborating and create relationships with organizations. And the second thing is product 3.0. So that's about looking internally. What do we make already? What do we use already? What is off the shelf already? So that VR virtual reality experience you saw, none of that was using anything new. It was just off the shelf stuff. It was buying an Oculus, subscribing to Unity, calling up a film director. You know, I didn't do anything particularly new. And so maybe your business makes a tool, or maybe you understand tools and perhaps repurposing them. So I like to use the Klarna example here, because maybe I'm a little bit anti-Klarna because it's just fostering consumerism. But imagine Klarna, just that ability to take that what Klarna has built and turn it into something that could perhaps support finance for refugees from Ukraine, for example. So it probably wouldn't require too much re-engineering, but it's just reframing your product or the skill set that you have to say, actually, there is a group of people, now we understand the need, there is a group of people out there that could actually utilize the thing that we've already built that's sitting here. So that's product 3.0. The third thing is about partnering up. I can't emphasize this enough. This understanding the need, but understanding perspectives is so important. So this is just a couple of organizations I've worked with in the past, and I think this audience might recognize Foolproof. I'm not sure, but that's why I'm here, really, because of the work I've done with Foolproof, which is a user experience design agency that helped me immensely on the virtual reality and field testing in Yemen. So that's the link with this conference. I should have said that at the beginning. But this slide is all about partnering and finding who are the experts that you need to really push this along. One of the things I didn't do with One Shot was partner enough and really understand that I needed more people than just myself and my small team. So the other thing I would say, the fourth thing of the model is POC fast. So fail fast, try something. Just do it. Don't overthink it. Just do something quickly. So within 4 weeks, we had the first kind of clunky version of using machine learning to track down evidence of small arms and light weapons diversion. So we had a little tool that would constantly, using semantic analysis and various other clever things, find Twitter feeds. That Thomas Rolbiecki was a particularly useful guy for spotting small arms and light weapon diversion in Nigeria. So he often came up, but it was a way of giving the journalists at the Halo Trust a regular feed of relevant articles. So again, in 4 weeks, in 3 months, we built a little bit more UI using Retool, and it was a little bit more professional. And so we were able to present it to the Halo board as a kind of workable, not quite an MVP, but at least it was an alpha. So that's the failing fast. And then the final bit is about implementing at scale. Now that probably you know better than I do about how to actually do that. But again, it comes down to partnerships. It comes down to how big you can think and the partnerships that you can make to scale these things. So for instance, the machine learning tool that we built for the Halo, we really required some of the big guns to come and help us, the Microsofts or the GCPs or whoever it might have been, to really help us leverage that. And that would have required us being better perhaps at creating those meaningful partnerships. And that's why I'm now working with the McCain Institute to try and understand how we work with those bigger organizations more effectively. I think I was conscious of time. I think that's me. I hope I finished on time. It started a bit late, but I wanted to leave time for a conversation and some questions and anything anyone wants to ask.
James, thanks. That was fascinating.
Okay.
And it's really, I think it's is it on? Yeah, I'm on. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's you can learn a lot by these, these failure stories, which of course are not failure stories. We know that, because there's an immense amount of learning that you learn as you go through this journey. Sounds to me like you've got a book here to tell people, that are building stuff, how to include other partners in the journey, and how to get people interested and engaged. I mean, there's, because I'm not going to go, but you built something and it took you on a journey, and I think the discovery that it wasn't that thing that was actually going to get you where you wanted, but other things happened along the way is a tremendous learning experience in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I'll take the Halo example. I mean, our company, it didn't take too much resource, but also the employee, we were all alive with it. It was only a small proportion of our days doing it, but actually it totally transformed what we felt we could do as a company. And so with this sort of great resignation, and people wondering what their purpose is here, I think, I always read the Stephen Covey, 4 reasons people go to work. They're treated kindly, they're used to their strengths, their work's meaningful, and they're paid fairly. And they rarely think about paid fairly if the first 3 are there. And so it just struck me that actually we probably all want to do this stuff anyway. And to the book thing, I'm not sure about that, but it is actually the first time I've given this talk in this context, the kind of lessons learned, because I feel like I've been in the fire a bit. And so it's nice to speak to you all and try and convey this in a way that hopefully makes sense. So I'd like your feedback at the end. It can be improved. Yeah.
I second the vote for the book. I wanted to ask, you said corporate social responsibility is dead. Why?
So it's more the framing of it. I'm sure the original endeavour is correct, right? We want to do more, but it strikes me that I guess the brand of it is dead in the sense that it became a tick box exercise. It became something that organizations could do to sort of perhaps apologize for the things that they were doing elsewhere. And so this is just a more integral model of looking at it. And I think that's now what we as employees are demanding, that it's more considered. And so even ESG, there's now a new wave of ESG sort of emphasis on ESG rather than corporate social responsibility. But I think we're missing the trick. The thing is about culture and the culture of your organization and weaving it in. So I'll give an example. At Infinite Lambda at the moment, we're trying to make everyone's OKRs include something that includes impact. So you will be judged at the end of your year, your PDP or your OKRs, or however your organization allows employees to plan their careers and their futures. But you can be measured by what you're doing in terms of contribution to something bigger than yourself and also something bigger than the organization. So CSR is dead. It's more like a cultural transition of weaving this into your organization. It's not just a tax efficient way of.
So first of all, I think you've just touched the most important subject on this conference, and thank you for that. I'm very fond of the quote by Peter Drucker, but that management is not doing things the right way, but doing the right things. And I think that we miss that as designers, that we don't ask ourselves common enough, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing what should be done? Because we concentrate so much on doing it in the right way. And I think it's mostly because that's how we end up in our work, in our context, and that's all okay. That's a question for you and for everybody in the room here. Are you familiar with the book by Victor Papanek, Design for the Real World?
So I will say no.
Okay, so that's a must read. That's a must read for everyone here. Design for the Real World. It's an amazing book by Victor Papanek, he was an industrial designer, but he said very important things. I read this book twice and I got full notes on that. It's amazing book. Highly recommended.
Oh, thanks.
It's one very important thing about among many others. Designers we have this amazing, unique skill set to translate different perspectives and engage different stakeholders. And he forbids us to keep it to ourselves. He said designers are required to use at least 10% of the time for doing something good. Outside your work, go use our skills. And I think this is the only thing your presentation misses. A very clear call for action to all of us here.
Yes. Because
you start with great fire, and you've got the spark. You can start a fire. And then I can speak for myself. You have this possibility to start a fire. Burn it all down, please.
Thanks. That's kind of you to say. I think I can't speak for the design industry, although I imagine it's the same as the software developing industry, in that it's priced itself out of the market for doing good for organizations. So software developers, I was double clicking on my Apple Watch, and I was like, whoa, waste of time in development for something that's, yes, a pain point that I have to pull my phone out my pocket. But it feels to me like the designers that designed that, I'm sure they would have rather have done something that would have contributed to the world a little more than just me being able to double click. So I agree. And so that idea of the call to action perhaps is to be defined. But I would encourage your expertise is desperately needed. And yet people don't know how to speak to you. They don't really know you do what you do. And there is this super awkward date when you have like an NGO speaking to a bunch of software developers. It's so awkward, it's cringing because they don't really know what to say to each other. But once you kind of got over that, then you start to foster a kind of common mission, and it ticks everyone's boxes. Just got to try and keep the financial director on board.
Hi. I really enjoyed your presentation, and like everyone has said, I think this is a project that should survive, like keep going. And I can very well relate with the challenges of funding humanitarian work. I bit hard work in humanitarian space, HIV management, and also improving family planning supply chain in Nigeria. So a slide I showed about weapon diversion to Nigeria and all that. I'm just like two ideas came to my mind, and I don't know if you have explored any one of them. The first one is whether you've considered getting grants from organizations that are very, interested in humanitarian project, because I feel like investors are investors and their mission kind of different. So, selling a product to say you will generate revenue to investors is more about, let's see what has generated first before they want to put in something. But selling to a donor is about impact of saving lives, right? So I think this is a life-saving project that is very viable if you pitch your case to donors. Example is BMJ, that's Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda. My first design or technology project in healthcare space was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I would recommend, looking in direction of donors that are very interested in funding technology-driven healthcare solution or life-saving solutions.
Thank you.
The second thought that I just want to put up, which I don't know if you have considered, is in line with the statement you made about the rich don't want to pay for the poor. Like, this really nothing is attractive to them to make money from paying bills for the poor. I've heard of projects where the project is actually focused on catering for the need of the rich, but then the revenue generated can be used to fund sustainable projects for less privileged, right? So maybe something the organization may want to think about, like, how might we create solution in the our world that can meet the need of the rich, and then revenue generated from that can sustain this project that is life-saving for humanitarian work, right? So that might be something that can, meet the need of generating revenue to pay your bills and pay your workers that are passionate about the project, and also be able to continue this great work that you're doing.
Thanks. Really clear. And to answer your first one, in fact, we've actually just completed and submitted a bid for 10 million in collaboration with Imperial. So the grant side, in fact, for the Yemen project, I did get 50,000, not just from my wife, but from a grant, from a family foundation of high net worth. And the second bit, you're right. I think what I'm conscious of there is going down the kind of we earn and then we give back model, and you can get entrenched in trying to earn and trying to earn and trying to earn. Oh, we'll do some good eventually. And I think what I'm trying to fight against is that whole learn, earn, and then give back, because it basically misses the energy and enthusiasm of people in the prime of their career. And then we get to, and we don't know what's going to happen later on in life. So, but we've engaged defense organizations, we've engaged perhaps more money paying organizations with the product, and therein lies my failure. I haven't done a very good job. One of my failures, done a very good job of selling it. But immediately in terms of the product development and where they want the product to go versus where you want the product to go, there is almost an immediate tension, and that's very hard, because of course, if I had to take an investment, and it was a tough thing to say no to, when we did get offers, it was really wondering what they would ask of us as soon as we had their money in our bank account. So it's I was talking to my dad before I came here, and it's this nuance between want and need, and of course marketeers make us feel that we need what we want, even though we don't need it. So I don't know how to solve that.
It's interesting you say, earn and then learn and share, which way you said it. Avril Chester, the founder of Cancer Central, she coined a term called communivation, where the community comes together and innovates. And the whole Cancer Central platform has been built by people donating their time. So she had very similar challenges to you, because Cancer Central is non-profit.
Yeah.
To get investment, it was quite a rough journey for her as well, and I think you two should definitely get connected.
I'd love to. Yeah, there is this sort of term flying around at the moment around co-production, and so I think it's a kind of along the same themes, and perhaps there is some momentum moving in that direction. Yeah, I'd love to be linked up.
Actually, one comment, and I think it touches to some of the comments that were done already. So I would consider like a broaden the scope. So for instance, I can imagine that some of the national bodies could be interested in leveraging these solutions for some prevention actions, which basically may help to save them fundings. You know, when you're admitted to hospital, we know how costly this is when someone is admitted to hospital. So if we can somehow evaluate those savings that can be done with some better prevention using this, could help you to get some grants, but probably you know that.
Yeah, no, but it's nice to hear it again, and also it's a slightly different context. I think you can get a little bit fatigued. So it's nice to be encouraged.
And I also have a question. I just wondered, like, how much over this journey you had to become more like a digital aware, like technology aware. You're obviously like subject matter expert in the health aspects. I wonder how much you need to be.
So I'm definitely a lay person when it comes to digital, but I went into a med tech company having left medicine. I went and worked with a med tech company in Cambridge for 3 years, and I was just surrounded by software developers and started to have a kind of understanding of who does what. And so, I enjoy being kind of fly on the wall to all of these super duper software people.
James, we have a comment from Ricardo from the virtual group. I think it's, I actually made a note on this, Ricardo and I have a similar question. He's basically, it's kind of, Ricardo, I think it's a common question, but he's bringing in this concept of what you're doing can be applied into healthcare to train staff. And I actually just wanted to ask you your insight into how what you're doing, especially around, the VR space, such a huge opportunity in that when it comes to actual training or opportunities for training. I remember watching that, thinking that I go home and my intention was to put on my Oculus and play Beat Saber. I'm never going to do that with the same kind of, after seeing what you do. But I just wanted to get your insight on that, the education part, and how you can actually do and use these technologies to take that training to grassroots level and different territories.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Duke University in the US. I've demoed at Imperial and various other medical schools and hospitals around the place, and there's a huge appetite for it, because if you ask most doctors, and I remember being a doctor, you actually learning and being moulaged, firstly, it hardly ever happens because the resource is there's so much resource has to go into a training day, but also there is this real nervousness around being kind of put under pressure in front of all of your colleagues, when you probably should know what you don't know, or perhaps you haven't seen seen this particular thing. I mean, who sees a mass casualty every day in London? Fortunately for us, it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. David Notwith says that the next time you train for your mass casualty is the next time there's a mass casualty, and that's the reality. So I think there's a real enthusiasm for it. What I see, and the WHO, the conversations I've had with the WHO, the conversations I've had with the Ministry of Defence, or all sorts of what I thought were going to be pretty good conversations, it always stops because the budget for sustaining these kind of developments is just not there. And then there is a nervousness around piling so much money into the development of new scenarios, and also the kind of learning management system that sits behind it. So what we proposed was a kind of the Netflix of trauma training, a kind of platform where you can go and put the headset on and choose whatever disaster you want to go to or whatever fits your kind of tapestry of work. But getting there is a sort of 5 million journey, and then after that there's a subscription model that's perhaps, you know, the kind of sustainable way of the NHS or the Department of Defence or whoever it might be to keep going. And I think that's where perhaps I misunderstood what you needed investment for, and how it could get you to the next stage. So it may just be that I haven't quite met the right person, or I haven't quite framed it in the right way that makes sense. And I guess this is what it's all about. It's just trying to learn, as you said, as you go along.
Joe, I wanted to share something. I was at an exhibition a few years ago. There were tech health exhibition. They were using VR as a educational tool for the fire brigade. Were using it to, you know, you can't keep burning down buildings to do training exercises. So you have this VR headset, and then you can then source where the fire started and, you know, clues, and it's an educational tool. And there was another one for first aiders, where they showed an incredible story. It was just so immersive. It was, you know, you tricked your brain that you were there. There was a car accident, some teenagers in the car. There was a car accident, and it was to train kids about, you know, before they pass the test, you know, but it was used for different. You could use the same narrative in different ways, you know, with different within different industries. What I'm getting at is that I asked about who funded it, and to your point, what we're talking about now, that funding came right across different councils. So the fire brigade, they had the same problem right across the country. You know, we need to do these training exercises. We can't keep burning down buildings. So they did the VR headset, and all that money was pulled together from all these different councils.
Which is where the partnership thing comes in.
Exactly.
The thing I've learned is that I didn't perhaps appreciate that. So that it was so. It's particularly in this country where the state has quite a handle on where pots of money go, how much you need, and they're also incredibly fragmented. The NHS is just a brand, isn't it? Otherwise, it's just a series of small businesses, and that's quite tricky. So I agree that it's all about the partnerships and the collaborations.
Well, thank you, James. It's this is a way of time. I'm sure we're gonna break for lunch, and I'm sure if you have any more questions, even virtually, pop them in, and we'll get them over to James or grab him during lunch. Thank you so much. Thanks, James.
Thanks.